What is your position on Minneapolis raising the minimum wage to $15 an hour, and do you support a tip penalty as part of any new ordinance?
Well, thank you for the question. Obviously, we're hearing that a lot right now. Just to be clear, my position on raising the minimum wage is and always has been that we should. At this point, we haven't decided on the amount, but I do support a $15 minimum wage increase. This is just a minute and a half on the time, right?
Right.
Right. And so, but the bigger question here is the tip penalty itself, and I consider it a tip penalty, so I'm not supporting a tip penalty or an exemption. These are things that are still under process. We're having our listening sessions, and I think it would be arrogant for us to come out and say what we're going to do without listening to the input. We're still gathering across the city, but I expect from what I'm hearing and from what I can see on the council that we'll be raising the minimum wage as we promised we would do, as we looked at the data, as we've done the research. We've seen the impacts, we've seen the risks, and we're certainly ready to take that action as a leadership position. And I think that'll be done probably in May of this year. So that's where we're at right now.
All right, Jeremy?
I also support raising the minimum wage to $15 an hour, but doing so incrementally and also without a tip penalty. The reality is low-wage workers need a raise right now. With the high cost of housing, childcare, and healthcare, there really are not a lot of options. This is a complex issue that affects nonprofits. It affects, how I've done business when I've run nonprofits before, and I think we need to have something that's thoughtful. And I also think we need this especially when it comes to small businesses. We need to have an answer for when they say, I won't be able to have my budget, I won't be able to pay my workers. We need to have a thoughtful answer that looks at their other parts of their budget, something that includes looking at their property, at the property taxes for small businesses that are affected by this change. Also looking at the fees that are paid to the city. When I work on a solution, I want both sides to see their part in it. I want to have assurances that when we raise the minimum wage to solve the very real issue that low-wage workers need an increase, we aren't creating another problem with small businesses in this district. I also want to acknowledge that $15 an hour doesn't get us to a living wage. This is just the beginning, and I'm committed to making sure low-wage workers and anyone that lives in this city is leading a great life. Thank you.
Erica?
I wholeheartedly support raising the minimum wage to $15. I do not support tip penalty or any other exception. Minnesota is one of the few states that doesn't have a tip penalty, so we don't need to introduce one now. Research shows that the pay gaps that exist in other jobs between white men and everyone else also exist in tipping practices, and a tip penalty exacerbates that effect. I learned a really interesting example of how a $15 minimum wage can really make a difference in someone's life. People who work in the restaurant business, who are supposed to have their wages garnished for child support, often don't actually get their wages garnished because with the tip penalty, their wages on paper aren't enough to garnish in the first place. So a $15 minimum wage with no tip penalty would actually really help with child support compliance. So think about that effect on those children and those families. But I do also think that we need to take care to bring along our smallest business owners, especially because business creation, along with home ownership, is one of the most reliable paths to wealth creation for people, mostly people of color, who don't benefit from inherited wealth. So we need to find a way to implement the change that allows our smallest business owners to adjust. But first and foremost, this is an anti-poverty measure. It's an equity measure. It will benefit people of color, women of all races, the working poor, and all the people in Minneapolis that we should be lifting up.